Hello and welcome to another episode of Engine Talk, and I believe this is episode 39. That's a lot. Before we actually get into the episode, I just want to kind of reiterate something I've said in several videos throughout the years, in that a lot of the content that I get for this channel comes from you, the viewers and subscribers and people that generously and so graciously donate things to the channel. And that is exactly where the subject of this video comes from today. This is an engine that was donated to this channel for me to do some videos of, and I'm still trying to determine the whole scope of the videos I'm going to be able to do with this engine, but that's part of the investigation. A fellow named Ryan, who's been in the hobby nearly as long as I have, not the same age as me. He started much younger, so he's much younger than me, but he started in 1989, and he contacted me probably around June 5th, and I've printed out the story of this engine and his history so that we can kind of discuss these things. But anyway, Ryan, thank you very much for the generous donation of this engine. And everybody knows that I like to do a lot of storytelling about these engines. I mean, when somebody provides me with an engine and I get the story from it, what am I supposed to do? Just throw it in a box and never show anybody about it? That wouldn't be very fun. So I like to talk about the story of the engine and then do a little bit of detective work to see what all matches up, and if we can find any holes in the history of this engine. So with all that said, let's go straight to the table and start doing a little bit of detective work, and I'll tell you the story about this engine. Okay, so here is the engine that is the topic of this Engine Talk episode, and it is an OS 61FSR-H engine. And before I start looking at this engine in depth, I'm going to tell you the story that I got from Ryan about this engine. So as I said, Ryan has been in this hobby for quite a long time, about the same length of time as I have. He got this engine in a helicopter deal about a year ago. And as you can see, this is a helicopter engine. He was flying it. So let's see here. So the story with what happened and how it got to me is this. He was flying it one day, it had been operating fine. He landed, and it was in a cool down period, and I don't know anything about flying helicopters, so I have to assume that in a cool down period, the engine is still running, and you're just letting it sit there, and basically like you're idling, is what I believe, and I'm not a helicopter pilot, so I don't know. So he said it was just in a cool down period, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. Just like that, just stopped. And he's like, uh-oh, not a good thing. So all of us know that anytime a glow engine is running and then just abruptly stops, something bad has happened, because I just had that happen with my FS90 about a month or so ago. So that was what led up to this coming to me. And basically he disassembled most of this engine and then kind of put some of it back together, inspected and found out what was wrong, and sent me an email saying, hey, do you want this? And I was like, well, of course. You know, don't throw it away, because I'm sure there's something here that's salvageable, and that's what we're hoping to find out. So I asked him for some more details about the history of this engine, and this is where it gets kind of unfortunate in my opinion, and I've also discovered some very interesting things here. So he got this engine with an XL60 on eBay about a year ago. He said the engine was completely locked up, so he soaked it in 3-in-1 oil for like a day or so, and maybe did some heating, got it freed up, and then he put it on his test stand and had it running as an aircraft engine with a 12.6 prop. He said it was running fine, but it had been sitting for years. And that was but the first thing I was like, oh, okay, you didn't disassemble it. You got it running and all that good stuff. And an engine that had been sitting for years, completely locked up, and then he got it freed up and ran it, and I guess obviously at that time decided to go ahead and fly it in the helicopter. Let's see here. I'm looking at my notes here. Okay, so what Ryan was also saying was that he would always run OS cold plugs in this. Now, again, I'm not a helicopter flyer, so I don't know anything about that, because he said the OS number 8 plugs were constantly burning out. And he was using 10% cool power, which is a big, huge red flag to me because I don't like cool power. I've had several instances in engines just recently that came to me because they weren't running because of cool power. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. He says cool power 10%, fuel always had a little run of rich. There was a weekend where he had to use 15% because the store was out of 10%. Yeah, scary. Anyway, the engine stops. He disassembles it and discovers that the race on this rear bearing let go. And that was the reason why the engine just abruptly stopped. So he was always under the impression with this particular engine, when he disassembled it, he discovered some things that didn't seem to make any sense, and they don't make any sense to me either. That's what we're going to try to figure out. In that, there is a review article by Peter Chen from 1982 on this engine, although my OS Engine's timeline shows that this engine came out in 1979. But that review from 1982 by Peter Chen shows us some things that I think have been changed on this engine. So this is an old engine. Let's just say it's that old. Who knows how many hands it's been through? Who knows how many things it's gone through? So the first thing here is, yes, it lost the race on the rear race. He didn't try to start it up, which would have been the worst thing you could do anytime something like that happened. So it just stopped, and that was it. So we lost a bearing. Probably could be the original bearing. Could have nothing to do with the fact that he was running cool power fuel. Could just be that it was just that bearing's time. So that's why, in my opinion, and it's my personal practice and my opinion, that any used engine I get, I go through completely and assess bearings and things like that, and then always replace them because everybody knows I'm big into replacing bearings. So that would have been what I would have done, but especially on an engine that's completely locked up, because an engine that's been locked up and sitting for years, the bearings are compromised. That's my personal opinion. The bearings are compromised and they must be replaced. Would that have stopped this? Maybe. Would it have prolonged the life of this engine? Maybe. But we're going to find out some other things here that I think might kind of lead us to believe that those things, the bearings, really weren't the demise of this engine. So anyway, the review article states very clearly that when OS made these engines, they made the helicopter engine in a ringed version only. Ring version only, and it says that very clearly in the ad. Well, guess what? The piston that Ryan pulled out of this engine is not a ring piston, and I'm going to bring this up here and show you the condition of this piston right now. It's in rough shape. I mean, it's really rough. Now, the thing I don't understand is if this, I've lost a bearing in an engine before in flight. And it was completely my fault, and I don't know if I was able to land or not. It was so many years ago. But when it was going, it was a full throttle pass over the runway, and just like that, boom. And when that happened and I disassembled the engine, I found that the top of the piston and all that, everything was just really destroyed because the rear race came out. The balls didn't stay in the bearing like this. They were out. They were bouncing all around. So I don't understand exactly how bearings or balls can get up through the intake port or anything like that to get to the top of the piston. I'm still trying to all these years, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. But anyway, so something catastrophic happened to my engine, obviously, and then this piston is just completely toast. And it's really unfortunate. So let's go back to the discovery here. This is an ABN engine. It's not a ringed piston. So And that Peter Chen was very clear that these were all made as ringed engines. So that leads me to believe, well, what really happened? I don't believe this is all original. Unless it's a later version of the OS 61FSR-H, and OS did convert some to ABN style engines. I don't know. That's just a theory. It's a potentiality. But here's the other thing here's this sleeve that came out of this, or the cylinder. And I don't know. I really want you to be able to see inside here. I don't know if you're going to be able to or not. Geez, I just don't know. All I can say is there is some really serious peeling going on. All up and down. Let's see here. So I see peeling in this sleeve extending from the exhaust ports all the way to the top. And maybe I can get an angle in here so you can see this halfway decent. I mean, there's just peeling look at that. There's a good picture of it here, and I can zoom in on this too maybe. This just is, and that is, in my opinion, that is not because of losing the race in an engine, because there's no balls that came out, and Ryan didn't tell me if he ever found any pieces of the race on top of the piston when he disassembled it, or so I don't know. All I can say is this sleeve is seriously peeled, which we already know is something that OS suffered with, and probably still has if they're still making engines like that, for decades. Sleeve peeling. And it's not always because of the metallurgy. Sometimes it's just because of age and wear, and or possibly fuel, or overheat, running too lean. So anyway, so here's these two things here that don't match up with the review article. ABN piston and sleeve in this engine. And here's another thing that's interesting about this, is that specifically, Peter Chen also said that the OS7B, 7 Bravo B, carb was what was installed on this engine. This is not an OS7B carb. This came with an OS7H carb, which is specifically a helicopter engine, or helicopter carburetor. So, what does that tell us? It tells us several things, really. It tells us that this engine is not completely original, at least not original to the review article from 1982. As I talk, I'm gonna start taking the rest of this apart so we can look inside better. So there we go. ABN piston sleeve, non-original manufacturer, non-stock original carburetor. So let's look inside here. Now, what this red stuff is, I don't know, but now see, this feels really rough. That to me feels like when the race came out, what makes most sense to me is when a race comes out like that, it stays down in the lower crank and it just kind of gets hung up on the connecting rod. And that's what this feels like. It looks like it went through maybe a couple of cycles before it stopped. Now, the connecting rod itself, I don't believe looks bad. It's compromised to some degree, but for the most part, I don't really think this connecting rod looks bad. I think this could be reused. At least it could be reused for someone like me, who's going to just run the engine a couple of times on a stand, make some videos, comment on it, say ooh and ah, and then put it in a box. Would somebody want to run this full time? I don't know, but personally I don't see any issues here with this connecting rod that would scare me away from putting it in a flight-worthy aircraft. Personally, I don't see anything wrong here that would cause me any issue there. I want to take this head off real quick too. The screws are pretty loose. So, and then we can take a little bit closer look inside the crankcase itself. So anyway, these are the things that I find interesting and curious in that. So going back to my personal preferences, if I ever get a used engine, especially a vintage one like this, because this is really, in my opinion, it's kind of a historical piece. And Ryan, thank you, because if nothing else, I'm going to clean it up and use it as a display. But so anytime I get an engine like that, I'm going to disassemble it completely and clean it up before I would even consider using it in flight of any kind. This front housing doesn't look too bad. Let's see here. There's some swirling things going on. So yeah, back here where the connecting rod runs in here, there's some, evidence that that race was kind of doing his thing in here. Now, the inside of this front housing right here, just from looking in the intake port here from the carb, I can see more scoring. How that would happen, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it's scoring such that this thing doesn't even really want to slide in there. I would think that, yeah, see, it doesn't even want to slide in there. So there's enough, obviously the crankshaft. I think this crankshaft is perfect. It's missing the woodruff key, which I don't think it really matters with the woodruff key because of the fact that this drive hub has a collet, tapered collet on it. Whether these things, the helicopter versions actually incorporated the woodruff key or tapered collet, I can't say that for sure. And maybe the review article, I can see a picture of that. But I know there are differences between the way they construct helicopter engines and stuff. But I believe this crankshaft, I think this crankshaft is actually a helicopter crankshaft. In fact, I'm sure it is because it says that. I think they do the porting on the crankshaft slightly differently for helicopter engines. So that would lead me to believe that this would be a later machining operation to put a keyway in here for a woodruff key. So it probably from the factory does come using a keyway or a woodruff key. So yeah, this engine's pretty rough. It's pretty toast. Can I use it for anything? I don't know. I might actually use it as a subject for replacing bearings because I can clean these things up and at least do a bearing replacement video on this and see if I can get it running again, which obviously I can't get this thing running again, not with this piston and sleeve. That's not going to happen. But I can at least clean it up externally and hopefully get all this stuff to clean up. And if it cleans up and it looks really nice, that would be super cool. So here's the thing with this engine. I mean, it's a vintage engine. It's unfortunate that it wasn't completely disassembled, cleaned, and bearings replaced at that time, and then maybe discovered, because maybe, just maybe, this piston and sleeve might have been in this kind of condition before Ryan ran this engine. Let's see here. I'm wondering how long. Maybe in here. I'm not going to sit here and read this again. He told me how long. He said he got this about a year ago. I'm not sure how many flights he put on, but he said it was running fine. So that's another thing that's interesting, is that an engine that has sleeve peeling as badly as I see here will not run. It's been my experience that it just won't run. It'll just lose compression and get hot and then just stop. So it had to have been working, but it would have been nice to know in advance. For me, I would have disassembled it completely, cleaned it out, inspected, made sure that everything was intact. That way you'd know for sure, was all of this damage caused by that one short second and a half or 2 seconds of a race letting go in the rear bearing, or is this that was just symptomatic, systemic, something, maybe there was already some peeling starting to happen here. And who knows, because I'm pretty much convinced that this sleeve, piston and sleeve, either they were mismatched and this is the original sleeve, and I don't think so. Because I've slid this thing up in here and it feels like it might, obviously it ran, so it had compression. So that would mean that these were a match set. I believe that these, if OS did not actually replace ringed engines and they started making some of these H's with ABN and sleeves, that's one thing. But if they didn't, then this is something that somebody did after the fact. And who knows, after the fact of being made at the manufacturer, something previous owners, however many there may have been, might have actually made some modifications to this engine. In fact, at first I thought maybe the whole front end might have been different because of the fact that this carb was completely different. But it does say in the review article that it had a 15 millimeter ID intake spigot, which is what this is, and this carb. So this could still be the original front end, although it looks a little bit different. But I don't know. So these are the things I like to kind of try to do a little detective work on and discover, what's really happening with this thing. with these engines that are provided like this. And that's the story of this engine. It's an unfortunate one that it came to an end. Its life came to an end like this, but it had probably had a very good service life and gave many or several people at least great pleasure in this hobby, and that's really what it's all about. So again, Ryan, thank you very much for this. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with this. I might try to clean it up and make a Boca bearing video using it for no other reason other than I've got bearings on hand, but I don't think that I can make this happen. The only other thing I was thinking of, and after now looking at this crankcase and stuff, it may not be a real possibility, is I'm not entirely sure, maybe my buddy Harvey can tell me if he watches this video, I'm not entirely sure if a piston and sleeve from an SF series engine would be a direct fit in here. I don't know. Because I have an OS 61SF engine, not an FSR, SF, that I could, in theory, if I really got industrious and really wanted to know, take apart and put the piston and sleeve in here, and maybe even the connecting rod if they're the same, and attempt to run this engine. Will I do that? I don't really know if I will or not. Trying to source another piston and sleeve for this would be difficult. I found a piston, not a problem. It was like $69, but it was a ring piston, so I'd have to buy a ring also. But then I don't know that it would work in this sleeve because it would be a ring design, and this is probably, it feels like it's an ABN tapered or type sleeve, so it would need a cylinder or a sleeve and a piston to actually get going, and that's probably costs more than the thing is worth, but who knows. So anyway, that's our engine talk episode for today. Once again, Ryan, thank you for this donation to the channel and contribution for some content. And thank you all that have contributed over the years to the content of this channel.